the Legacy Study Bible, is it called Legacy Study Bible, Legacy Standard Bible? The Gospel of Mark has been released in PDF format. And so you can get a free download in PDF format of the Gospel of Mark. And interestingly, Legacy Standard Bible, there it is. Copyright 2020 by the Lockman Foundation. So Lockman still has, it says Legacy Standard Bible is adapted from the New American Standard Bible, copyright 1960, 71, 77, 95 by the Lockman Foundation. All rights reserved. So Lockman still owns the copyright on this. Masters does not. That's interesting. Very interesting. So that almost says to me that Lockman is dividing between the 2020 and the Legacy Standard Bible to try to capture a little larger group, a little larger portion of the audience. Which explains why the 2020 went the direction that it did. Though I got the feeling personally that this LSB with Masters was more of a modern idea, a very recent idea. But anyways, just looking at the end of Mark, they have a single bracket around verses 9 through 20. And then after verse 20, they put the shorter ending. Or is that the medium? It all depends on which one you identify as what. Also in a single bracket, but separated from the previous and then in italics. So you may know of the shorter ending, and they promptly reported all these instructions to Peter and his companions. And after that, Jesus himself sent out through them from east to west the sacred and imperishable preaching of eternal salvation. And so that's put at the very end, after verse 20, with a separate brackets thing. So that's interesting. So you might want to grab that. I think it's 316publishing.com is where I downloaded it from. I was sent an email about it if you want to look at what they're coming up with for the Gospel according to Mark, what that's going to look like. And I did just happen to notice here in looking at it, they are still following the NASB's all block Old Testament citation format, which surprises me a little bit. I mean, I like it for reading, but it's a royal pain when you're quoting, because in electronic format, it looks like you're yelling. There's no way to transfer over the large font, small font stuff that you do with that. So I'm not sure what to do about that, to be honest with you. I really am a big advocate of knowing when you're reading a quotation from the Old Testament. It's extremely important. And then the other thing is, and this is going to be interesting, and I wondered how they were going to handle this, because I've been told, this is from the New Testament, I've been told that in the Old Testament, they're going to be rendering the Tetragrammaton as Yahweh. So instead of L-O-R-D with the O and the R and D in small caps, it's going to be rendered as Yahweh. Now that's going to freak some Russians out. I've mentioned this to you before, but the Russian Synodal Bible, the standard Bible that's used in Russia, does not follow that convention. And so you have no way of knowing in looking at that Bible whether you're seeing the Tetragrammaton or not. And so the name of God in the Old Testament, unknown. And which is to the great advantage of Jehovah's Witnesses, by the way. But then how do you handle that in the New Testament? So if you put Yahweh in the Old Testament and then you quote the Old Testament in the New Testament, what do you do now when Yahweh appears as Kurios? That was the issue that the New World Translation faced, New World Translation of Jehovah's Witnesses, because they inserted Jehovah into the Old Testament. They rendered all the appearances of the Tetragrammaton in the Old Testament as Jehovah. But there are certain places where the New Testament writers quote from the Old Testament and identify Jesus as Jehovah. When the New Testament of Jehovah's Witnesses, the New World Translation, quotes from the Old Testament 237 times. This was, last time I knew this number was back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. If they made any changes since then, I haven't kept up with it. Okay, so back then, it was 237 times. They inserted the name Jehovah into the New Testament. Though we don't have New Testament manuscripts that do that, they did that because they're citations from the Old Testament, except when that would have messed with their theology and identified Jesus as Jehovah, and they don't do it there. They do Kurios. So going back to the Legacy Standard Bible, right at the beginning of Mark, you have that conflated citation from Isaiah and some of the minor prophets. Behold, I send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make ready the way of the Lord. And my assumption is, in the Old Testament, going to be make ready the way of Yahweh. I'm assuming that the LSB rendering of that text in the Old Testament will be make ready the way of Yahweh, make his paths straight. So will there be some type of a translational note? There aren't any notes in this. This is just straight text. A translational note in the introduction, something like that that'll say, this is what we did, this is why we did it. You're not going to see Yahweh in the New Testament. This is why. I don't know. I'm not saying that I have a simple solution to that. It's one of the issues that you face, but there you go. So 316publishing.com if you want to take a look at that, and it might be useful to you.